Takeru is an ugly, overworked, middle-aged man who hates his boring life. One day, after returning home from his dead-end job, he collapses onto his couch to watch some TV, but all of a sudden, he finds himself teleported to a strange dimension with Discount Hero X sitting across from him. He says he's the one in charge of the solar system. So Takeru asks him if he's an alien, but he says he's actually more like a god, at least as far as Takeru is concerned. Long story short, it's his job to make sure the life on various different planets doesn't go extinct, and he does that by throwing people into new worlds to see what happens. Takeru happens to be the next on the list of people to be sent out, and of course he has the right to refuse, but since he's technically dead right now, his soul will vanish if he doesn't agree to be sent to another world. Takeru doesn't think that's fair at all, and he's right, it's not fair. But there's nothing he can do about it. Kami tells him he doesn't have to worry about it too much since he will be given special powers so he can survive in the new world, but he hasn't really thought about what abilities he should give Takeru, so he takes out a notepad and starts writing down some ideas. Obviously, he would need to be able to use magic, so Kami writes down maxed out mana and asks Takeru if there's anything else he'd want to get. Since Kami is accepting requests, Takeru asks him if he can get a big OP goth girlfriend in the new world. But with how ugly and boring Takeru is, Kami says it won't be easy. Still, he promises to work something out for him once he arrives, and as an added bonus, is granting Takeru an amazing search ability, global language understanding, and several debuff resistances. He's honestly not sure if he's allowed to give people so many op stats in one go, but there's no time to change it now since Takeru's body has already begun to disappear, so he wishes him good luck with his new life. In the next moment, Takeru wakes up lying next to a tree, and he has a good grasp of what happened, but he wonders what he should do now. He decides to just start walking in a random direction in hopes of running into some people, and fortunately, he manages to spot a village close by. Although going there right now wouldn't do him much good since he is 100% broke right now. Just then, he remembers that Kami said he'd be getting a search skill to help him gather material, and that sounds like a good way to earn money, so he holds out his stick and shouts for the search magic to activate, but nothing happens. He then starts freaking out because if he can't figure out how to use his ability, then he's going to starve sooner or later. He starts writing out possible trigger words in the ground, and he eventually comes up with the idea to just say the word search. And that seems to do the trick. Purple icons pop up next to all the harvestable items in the area, and if he says the word scan next to one, it shows a detailed description of what it is. This particular flower happens to be B rank, and he's not sure what that means, but it must be good, so he decides to gather as many plants as he can from this area. After a few minutes of gathering, Takeru has gotten a few pieces of everything this area of the forest has to offer. But most of the plants turn out to be E rank, so he's not sure if doing this was worth the effort. Just then, he notices a pretty rock nearby, and he wonders if it's valuable enough to sell, but when he picks it up, his scan tells him it's just a big piece of anterior poop, which is gross, but the poop is C rank for some reason, so he can't complain. He has gathered up enough resources for the day, so he decides that it's time to head over to the village and see how much money he can get from selling these. By nightfall, Takeru eventually arrives at the village gates where he meets one of the guards, and I can't tell if Takeru is really tall or if the guard is just really short. The guard's name is Marlowe, and he is surprised to hear that Takeru is a gatherer because it's rare to see people like him around here. Marlowe assumes he must be here to sell some materials, so he opens the gate and tells Takeru to head to the village's general store. Takeru eventually arrives at the general store, and there he meets the store owner behind the front desk. He asks the man if he is willing to buy some stuff from him, and as he says this, he pulls the poop rock out of his bag. The owner is amazed when he sees the rock because it's an amazing find, so he offers to pay 5 gold coins for it. Takeru is glad to hear that he can sell the rock, but he's not sure what 5 gold coins are really worth here, so he asks the owner for a little explanation. The owner tells him that if he wanted to stay at an inn, he'd have to pay around 500 raves, and 5 gold coins are worth 5,000 raves total, so this poop rock is actually pretty valuable. The owner asks Takeru if he has any more goods to offer, so he empties his bag, and the owner can't believe all the exotic plants he managed to gather. He asks why Takeru bothered coming to a remote village like this if he had this many valuable items, so he explains that he just picked these up during his journey here. The old man understands, and now that he has an idea of Takeru's skills, he says he has a favorite ask. Takeru didn't come here expecting to receive a side quest, but he says he's willing to help depending on the difficulty of the request. So the owner explains that he wants Takeru to get some mithril ore from the eastern mountains. That sounds like a lot of work, but the owner says he's willing to pay 360 gold coins for it, so Takeru accepts the mission. However, the owner then turns serious and mentions that there are monsters out in those mountains, and hearing that makes Takeru really nervous, so he is going to need to be careful. That night, Takeru rents out a room at the village inn, and he is glad he finally gets a chance to relax. The only thing that'd make this better is if he could get a bath, but he's not sure where to find one. Just then, one of the housekeepers knocks on the door and comes in with a bowl of hot water. Takeru asks her what this is for, so she explains that part of their service is to offer guests bowls of hot water so they can clean themselves, and Takeru's stench practically made her eyes water while he was checking in, so she brought some without him needing to ask for it. Takeru appreciates the gesture, but he says he'd prefer to have a proper bath instead. However, the girl looks at him in confusion because only nobles and rich people can afford to have baths, and Takeru has Broki written all over his face. He falls to his knees at the realization that he won't be able to take baths normally in this world, and the girl can see that he's really upset about not getting a bath, so she tells him that there are some wizards who are able to use spells to clean others, so maybe he could try that instead. After hearing her mention wizards, Takeru remembers that Kami gave him the ability to use magic, so he should be able to use a cleaning spell. He's really grateful for the girl's insight, so he gives her a huge tip as thanks and sends her on her way. Once she's gone, he attempts to use cleaning magic by yelling out the word clean, and it works on the first try. However, feeling the magic rub all over his body causes him to make some weird noises, so the girl probably thinks he's a weirdo now. On the bright side, the clean spell seems to be really effective, so Takeru isn't going to have to worry about smelling funky all the time, but he still wishes he could enjoy a proper bath. The next day, Takeru heads out to gather a few more items to sell when he notices a new symbol from his search skill. Each symbol represents a particular kind of loot, so he wonders what it might be. But to his utter horror, when he takes a look, he finds a decomposing skeleton on the ground. His scan tells him that this poor guy is named Belria, and he must have died fighting out here a while ago. He goes closer to inspect the corpse, and that's when he finds a locket with a note on it. The note was from Belria's little sister, and she was basically thanking him for working so hard to earn money to treat their father's illness, but more than anything, she just wanted her brother to make it home safely, so she asked him not to do anything too dangerous. But he clearly didn't listen to her advice. Takeru spends the next hour holding a burial for Belria, and once that's done, he draws a circle and casts a barrier so he can set up camp. The next morning, Takeru heads further into the forest until he arrives at the Forest of White Trees. This place is supposedly full of monsters and creepy as hell, so Takeru would have loved to avoid this place altogether, but it's the only way for him to get to the eastern mountain. He casts a light spell so he can see well enough to scan the area, but he doesn't spot anything of high value. Even weirder is the fact that he doesn't see any monsters around here, even though this place is supposed to be crawling with them. He doesn't question it too much and decides to take advantage of the strange absence of monsters to breeze his way through the forest. However, as he was running, he ended up falling straight off the edge of a cliff. There's no way he'd survive a drop like this, so he desperately starts calling out spell words in an attempt to save himself, and fortunately, when he says the word fly, a floating spell activates, allowing him to land safely. He's now stuck at the bottom of a cavern, but he notices a ton of ores in the nearby walls, so he decides to make the most of it and starts mining them out. He finds a lot of valuable ores like silver, but there's still no sign of any mithril, so he decides to head deeper into the caves. After walking for a bit, his search skill alerts him to an ore deep in some rocks, but before Takeru could head over, he feels the entire cave system begin to shake, so he's going to need to be careful. He uses a controlled fire blast to break through the rock, and as luck would have it, he manages to find some mithril ore, but it's not much. The cave system suddenly begins shaking again, so Takeru is starting to worry that the roof might collapse. The smart thing to do right now would be to head home for the day and come back when you know it's safe, but just like a fanatic cage diver, he decides to keep going deeper anyway. He eventually comes across an opening which leads him to a beautiful aquifer, and he is really excited because the water looks so dazzling. He uses his ability to scan it, and to his surprise, he discovered that this is S-rank ancient dragon magical water. This is the most valuable thing he has ever found, but that ancient dragon part does concern him a little since he wouldn't want to have to deal with one of those. Just then, as Takeru dips his hands in the water, something huge emerges from the water, and a moment later, Takeru is face to face with the ancient dragon. The dragon yells at him for daring to intrude upon its lair, and it is letting off a deadly pressure to intimidate Takeru, but he doesn't actually notice anything wrong. Takeru realizes this is his fault for intruding on the dragon's home, so he sincerely apologizes for his mistake, but this catches the dragon off guard since it has never seen someone remain so calm in its presence before. It takes a liking to Takeru and asks him if he's really a human because he has an unnaturally high amount of mana. It says Takeru's mana pool might even be greater than its own, but Takeru has no idea what it's talking about. The dragon's name is Voldius, and he has a favorite ask now that he knows Takeru has such an expansive mana pool. Basically, it wants Takeru to hatch its egg since it doesn't have enough mana to do it, and as a reward, it will give him a large cluster of mithril ore. Takeru thinks that sounds easy enough to do, so he takes the egg and starts channeling mana into it. But halfway through, the egg suddenly starts draining all his mana until he eventually loses consciousness. By the time he wakes up, he finds a little baby dragon sitting in front of him, so he realizes the hatching was a success. Voldius is glad to see his child has finally been born, but he then proceeds to ask Takeru to take it with him on his journey. Takeru asks if he's sure about this since he thought Voldius would want to spend time with his kid, but Voldius says Takeru is far stronger than him, so his child would be better off with him. And now that Voldius has some milk to buy at the bottom of his lake, so he submerges himself and leaves Takeru to take care of B. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.